Factories are the engines of the modern world, forging the steel, refining the fuel, and synthesizing the chemicals that build our cities and power our lives. They are monuments to human ingenuity and ambition. But sometimes, the very things designed to sustain our world become the instruments of its destruction. They become ticking time bombs, their fuses lit by negligence, their detonations silenced by corporate greed. On the night of December 2nd, 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, went to sleep. It was a city of nearly 1 million people, a sprawling urban center built around a promise of progressive pesticide plant owned by the American company Union Carbide. But while the city slept, a catastrophic failure was unfolding within the factory's walls. Water entered a storage tank containing over 40 tons of methyl isocyanate, a lethally toxic gas. The resulting chemical reaction was violent and unstoppable. A pressure valve burst, and a dense, poisonous cloud escaped into the cool night air. It was heavier than air, hugging the ground as it silently enveloped the sleeping city. The gas swept through the shantytowns surrounding the plant, then into the denser city center. It burned the eyes, seared the lungs, and choked the life from its victims where they lay. People awoke, gasping, their insides on fire, blinded and disoriented. The ensuing panic was a scene from a nightmare. Streets were filled with the dying and the dead, a tide of humanity desperately trying to outrun an invisible killer. Hospitals were overwhelmed within an hour, doctors facing a medical crisis for which there was no precedent and no cure. By morning, thousands were dead. In the days, weeks, and years that followed, the death toll would climb into the tens of thousands. The gas didn't just kill, it maimed, leaving a legacy of chronic illness, birth defects, and contaminated land that poisons Bhopal to this day. It wasn't a freak accident. Union Carbide knew the plant was dangerously under-maintained. Safety systems had been disabled or were non-functional. Alarms were turned off. Staffing had been cut to skeletal levels. The company had received numerous warnings, both from its own engineers and from local journalists, about the potential for a runaway reaction. The cost of upgrading the safety features at the Bhopal plant was estimated at a few $1 million. The company chose not to spend it. Silence, it seemed, was cheaper. 2,800 miles to the northwest, in the Soviet Republic of Ukraine, another monument to progress was humming with power. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was a source of national pride, a symbol of the USSR's command over the atom. In the early hours of April 26, 1986, technicians at reactor number 4 began a poorly conceived and dangerously unauthorized safety test. They were attempting to simulate a station blackout to see if the reactor's turbines could power its own cooling pumps in the brief interval before emergency generators kicked in. A series of deliberate sequential violations of safety protocols began. Control rods were removed. Emergency cooling systems were disabled. The reactor was pushed into a state of extreme instability, a volatile condition its designers never intended it to enter. At 1:23 a.m., a massive power surge occurred. The attempt to reinsert the control rods and shut down the reactor failed. In a matter of seconds, 2 colossal explosions tore the 2,000-ton lid from the reactor core, blasting a column of radioactive fire and debris a kilometer into the night sky. The graphite moderator ignited, starting a fire that would burn for 9 days, continuously spewing a plume of radioactive isotopes: cesium-137, iodine-131, strontium-90 across the atmosphere. The initial response was one of denial. Plant director and local officials insisted it was a minor fire. Firefighters arrived with no protective gear, sent to extinguish a blaze on the reactor's roof, unknowingly marching into an invisible furnace of radiation. They received fatal doses within minutes. It took nearly 36 hours for the government to begin evacuating the nearby city of Pripyat. The silent radioactive cloud, carried by the winds, drifted northwest, across Belarus, over Scandinavia, and into Western Europe. An entire continent was dusted with the fallout from a single preventable explosion. The final human cost of Chernobyl will never be truly known, lost in a generation of cancers, birth defects, and blighted lands. The disaster exposed the fatal flaws in the Soviet system: a culture of secrecy, a disregard for safety, and an arrogance that placed ideology above human life. The operators who conducted the fatal test were not rogue agents. They were products of a system that encouraged cutting corners and rewarded blind obedience. They knew the risks. They proceeded anyway. In the United States, the danger was not from a single cataclysmic event, but from a slow, seeping poison. In the 1940s and 50s, the Hooker Chemical Company needed a place to dispose of its industrial waste. It found a convenient, unfinished canal near Niagara Falls, New York, a neighborhood known as Love Canal. For years, the company dumped nearly 22,000 tons of toxic sludge into the waterway, a witch's brew of carcinogens, including benzene, dioxin, and dozens of other chemical compounds. After filling the canal, the company simply covered it with dirt. They then sold the land to the local school board for $1. The deed of sale contained a clause mentioning the chemical waste, but it downplayed the danger. On this toxic landfill, a school was built. A community of modest suburban homes grew around it. For years, residents complained of strange odors after heavy rains and chemical sludge seeping into their basements. Children playing in the fields developed skin rashes and burns. But the true horror emerged in the 1970s when a local reporter began investigating an alarming rate of birth defects, miscarriages, and cancers in the neighborhood. The community, led by outraged mothers, discovered the truth buried beneath their homes. The chemicals had leached into the soil and groundwater, poisoning the entire town from below. The idyllic suburban dream had become a toxic nightmare. The response from Hooker Chemical and local officials was, at first, dismissive. They denied responsibility, pointing to the warning in the deed. But the evidence was overwhelming, the human cost undeniable. The fight for Love Canal became a national scandal, a landmark event that exposed the dark underbelly of America's chemical revolution. It led to the creation of the EPA's Superfund program, designed to clean up the nation's most hazardous waste sites. But for the families of Love Canal, it was too late. Their homes were bulldozed, their community erased. They were the casualties of a company that viewed a neighborhood as nothing more than a convenient and cheap dumping ground. In each of these tragedies, the pattern is the same. It is a story of warnings ignored and safety measures bypassed. It is a calculus of risk where profits are weighed against human lives and lives are found wanting. In Bhopal, executives in a distant American headquarters knew their Indian facility was a catastrophe waiting to happen. At Chernobyl, the pursuit of production targets and systemic arrogance overrode the fundamental laws of physics. At Love Canal, a company chose to bury its toxic legacy, hoping it would remain forgotten beneath the foundations of a new community. These were not acts of God. They were acts of men executives, engineers, and bureaucrats who understood the potential for disaster. They knew the cost of ensuring safety. But silence was cheaper. Negligence was profitable. And the price was paid not in boardrooms or on balance sheets, but in hospitals, in cemeteries, and in the poisoned earth left behind.